Now, my grandmom, I saw this, and this is not an antique, but look at this. This is an African violet. She's got another African violet. It's blooming. I should have brought that over here. But, you know, my grandmom had these all the time. And I always think of little old ladies having African violets. Now, Abby, you're not certainly a little old lady. As I've said, I think you're very sexy, and I've seen you naked in your bedroom late at night. And I haven't said anything because, quite frankly, why should I complain? But why, how do you keep these things alive? What's the secret? I've had a couple of them, and I can't get them to bloom, and they die.
Well, every time you water them, you have to feed them with African violet food.
Oh, is that right?
It's about like 5 drops. And the secret is to get some sort of ceramic pot like this. This actually is an antique.
Oh, is that right?
This and the other one across these are English pudding pots.
Right. And the African violets like pudding?
Yeah, that's it. They would put pudding in this, put them in the oven, and bake English pudding.
I see.
But
that's pretty deep for pudding.
I know.
Is it pudding for a whole family? Or
yeah, they make, and sometimes they put stuff in them, you know.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes it might be a meat type of pudding.
But you have to have the African violet food.
The key is, you buy these little African violets starting out very tiny.
Right.
And it's like anything. It's like a fish that has a small aquarium. It will only grow according to the size of the pot that it's in.
I see.
So, same with African violets. Now you can't get too big with African violets because, you know, they won't bloom. They'll just be all leaf.
Right.
So that one over there is probably the largest you can get. It's probably about 6-7 inches across.
Right. In
the diameter of the pot. The secret is a lot of people, you know, water from the top. Right. And you can't. If you get these leaves wet, it'll destroy them.
Is that right?
That's right. So if you're going to water, and it's okay to water from the top about once every 6 months because, you know, depending on where you live, you get all these salts on the top and calcium.
Right.
So you want to wash those down. So it's okay to take a little tiny spout and put it in there.
Right.
But normally, the way to do it is you fill this up about halfway. You put the food in there and you let it sit for no more than half hour. It soaks it up from the bottom.
I see. How often do you do this?
Probably once every 2.5 weeks.
All right.
You know, this is not, you know, I don't have a real dry house. And by the way, I tried to grow these when I lived in Texas.
Right.
Forget it. For some reason, they just wouldn't grow. But they love it. They love a lot of light. They have, in order to bloom, they also need a lot of light. And so, right against my window here, they have a lot of light.
And is there a season when they bloom? I mean, do they bloom all the time?
They bloom all year long.
Really? Is that right?
I
How come this one's not blooming?
Well, this one has only bloomed for me twice.
Really? You have to talk to it.
It's very healthy, though. You can see the leaves. It's when the leaves turn gray and they start flopping over, and you need to take those off. But it means there's something wrong with it. You know, it's just not in great shape. But this one's in great shape. It just needs to bloom again.
I know. I saw it. It looks great.
This one constantly blooms.
Right.
And I have transplanted it 3 times. And when you transplant it, you have to use African violet soil.
Well, good Lord, these are very temperamental plants.
They are.
So you need African violet food, you need African violet soil, and you've got to put it in a pudding pot.
Well, you don't have to put it in a pudding pot, but you need to put it in some sort of pot where it can be watered from the bottom. And don't always keep it in those cute little pots because these things really like to get a little bigger. Right. So you want to transplant it into this size pot, and then maybe one just a little bigger, but no bigger than that. Right. And they will grow forever. I have had this one almost 7 years.
Now,
almost 7 years, and it has
are these indigenous to Africa, do you know? I mean,
you know, I really don't know that much about them.
Really? Well, you seem to know a lot about them.
Well,
you're talking about pudding pots, and you're talking about African violet food, and when to water them, and when not to water them.
I don't know about their history.
All right, see.
The reason I wanted to grow them is a very dear friend of mine that lived in Dallas, Texas. She had this one huge window, and she had a table, and they were full of them.
Right.
Every color you can imagine. She lives, of course, it's more humid in Dallas.
Are there varieties? Is that what they?
There are different varieties.
All right. So she had these.
There's some that have just the plain standard blooms, and there's others blooms that are very, very curly. They also have a variety that has a big bloom.
So did she inspire you, this lady?
She did. I always wanted to grow them because I always thought that window was so beautiful that she had them in.
See, I tried orchids too, but orchids.
Well, I did try orchids when I first came up here. They're beautiful, but you really need a lot of humidity for an orchid. You need a hot house. You need greenhouse.
Right.
And I think I could grow them if I had a greenhouse.
Now you are going to change the subject here, Abby. You belong to a book club, right? And I've come and I've spoken at your book club, and that was lovely, speaking to these ladies and everything like that. And I had the pleasure, I should say, I almost said they had the pleasure. They had the pleasure of reading one of my first successes, Gustav's Lighthouse.
Yes.
Big thick tome, you know, but they read it. And they had some discussion about it, and I came in, and it was very interesting to hear them talk about what it meant and what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. Do they know now that I'm about to endeavour on another book? They know about the Hollywood thing, of course, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm coming to talk about that at some point in time. But we haven't
Sure,
scheduled.
I'll invite you back.
But what do you think about the book about Venice?
I think it's a great idea.
Do you really? Do you have any ideas? See, I'm trying to find, the thing I don't know about what to do about this is this guy and this gal in Venice, you know, of course they fall in love. And of course the whole notion of saving Venice is you know, there is you know, some conflict there. But I'm trying to find some conflict in their relationship. Can you think of something that might cause them some kind of you know, like cultural differences or something like that? What would it be?
I have a great book. It's called 1,000 Nights in Venice.
Right.
And it's exactly about that.
Is that
it's
right?
about a woman.
Somebody stole my idea.
Well, no, but it's something along those same lines. She was actually, it's a true story. She was a chef here in the States.
Right.
She was writing for some sort of food journal. Went to Italy, went to Venice specifically, met this man, and he was completely opposite of what she thought she'd ever want in her life. He ended up following her back to the States.
Right.
It was just love. It was love like at first sight. I mean, just something so bizarre. She ends up selling her restaurant, or her part of the restaurant. She had a share in it. And she moved to Venice with this man that she was in love with him. She hardly knew him. He was a banker, worked at the bank.
Right.
And so there were lots of cultural differences. Lots. Even aesthetic differences and taste differences in the way they wanted to do their apartment, and
right.
Well, they eventually did redo it in Venice, but her dream was to open a cooking school in Italy, and in fact they both opened a cooking school.
Wow. What's the name
together.
of the book?
1,000 Nights.
Can I borrow it?
Yes,
I'll have to look at
yes.
it.
But I mean, I think anytime you've got that cultural difference.
Right.
You know, my first husband was from Holland. He immigrated over here when he was 6 years old, but he grew up with his mother and father, who never really left Holland behind.
You know,
they barely spoke English, and so he grew up with this, and there were all these cultural differences.
You know, we've had this discussion before. You told me about him, and you said that when you read Gustav's Lighthouse, the guy from Norway, it reminded you of your husband, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Norwegians can be very cold.
Very cold. You know, I had my
Danishmen are very cold, and Dutchmen are just crazy.
You met my friend Kimmy, who came over. She's my muse, and I put her on YouTube, and you saw the. Abby has been nice enough to come and see some of these things on YouTube, and Kimmy said that she said that when we were together, you know, we had this relationship, and you knew her when we were together, that that I became kind of like Gustav, this cold, distant sort of guy. So your husband was like that too, and
my first
I think all the Scandinavians, the Norwegians, and that sort of thing are like that. It's interesting.